Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this presentation with ViroGates in connection to the company's report for the first quarter of 2022. The company is today being presented by CEO Jakob Knudsen and by CFO Silva. And my name is Alf Riple. I work at Västra Hamnen Corporate Finance, and I will be your moderator for today. We will start the presentation now with a presentation by the company where they go through the highlights of the most recent quarter. And after that, we will have a Q&A session. Everybody who's listening can ask questions by writing them. There's a field on the either right side of the screen or the bottom of the screen, depending on what device you're using. It says questions. It might be indicated with a talk bubble. You can enlarge that and write the questions, and we will read them out, and then the company will answer. So I'll just end it on my introduction by saying that this session is being recorded and that the recording will later on be found on ViroGates homepage and on Västra Hamnen Corporate Finance channel on YouTube. So with that, I give the word to you, Jakob and Mark.
Thank you very much, Alf. We are happy to be able to present this morning, and this is going to be focused obviously on our Q1 results, but as we've also done more recently, we'll also do a quick roundup of what the company is about. And we've made some changes to the outlay, not so much to the content, but for previous listeners, there is a new way of presenting it. So we are happy to go ahead. And my name is Jakob Knudsen. I'm the CEO, and I'll start off, and then I'll hand over to Mark. So as usual, we have a couple of forward-looking statements. Not that this is considered a sensitive presentation, but anyway. ViroGates, as mentioned, is an international medical technology company. We work within the in vitro diagnostics area. It's a kind of a subdivision of the medical devices, but it has its own directive and regulations under the EU. We are a company that was founded back in 2001, spent a lot of time doing research, developing products, doing clinical research, and so on and so forth. We are headquartered in ViroGates, which is a suburb of Copenhagen, and we are right now 14 employees. We work by ways of an outsourced model in many ways, so that we handle sales, marketing, patents, and logistics and so on from here. But other than that, we have contract manufacturers to handle the products. We are listed since 2018 on the Nasdaq OMX First North Growth Market here in Copenhagen. And our credo is basically to improve patient outcomes by supercharging triage, and triage is the process of deciding whether patients go in or out of the acute ward. The general problem that we're addressing is at the center of this slide. It's basically the healthcare systems that are increasingly overburdened. We have a term called crowding, and this is by far the biggest issue to any acute ward. Whether you talk Spain, Denmark, or the US, it's on the topic every time there's a conference and a meeting among acute care physicians. It's driven by an aging population, the increase in the number of morbidities, i.e. diseases when people get older, shortness of staff, and so on. So we have a couple of stats here, but it's just it just goes to show that this is a huge issue across the world. SuPAR is a molecule that is naturally occurring in the bloodstream of everybody, whether we have an ongoing disease or not. We're able to measure this particular protein by ways of our products, and we have taken out patents to protect predicting outcomes by ways of using suPAR. It's basically a reflection of the immune system of the patients. So whenever inflammation is occurring, this is shown in the suPAR levels, and so it basically predicts the outcome of the patients. A low suPAR is always favorable to the outcome, and a higher suPAR is a cause of concern. And I'll show a little bit more about that. So this is how we use Super in the emergency departments, i.e. the entrance of the hospitals. Patients typically arrive by referrals from general practitioners, or they arrive directly by ambulances, or in some markets there's a direct walk-in, depending a little bit on the system. But anyway, Supernostic is taken at the door, and if the super level is below 4 nanograms per milliliter of plasma, this supports a discharge of the patient, i.e. the treating physicians are able to more rapidly discharge the patients, basically for the benefit both of the system and also of the patient. And as you can see down below, we have what is known as a negative predictive value. That means that the risk of an adverse event is very unlikely on 30 and 9 days measurement. It's about half of the patient that falls into this category. On the other hand, you also have the sort of red corridor, which is the high supers. This basically supports the hospitalization of the patients because there's a high risk of a negative outcome, and we'll get a little bit back to that. But those patient streams are fewer, and on the next slide you will see how we actually stack up against some of the existing systems. So this may seem a little bit complicated, but on the top bar we have the distribution of patients by ways of using a typical triage, i.e. the risk stratification that is used currently. It's called the National Early Warning Score, but basically it shows that there's a high degree of yellow patients. This means that those are patients that where the physicians are in doubt as to whether to admit them or send them home. If we then triage them by ways of using Super, so we basically put them into new buckets depending on Super and the new nose system, we have a slight increase in the red bucket, but we actually also like to see that because those are the patients that are truly in need. We don't want to discharge a patient who is actually in need of hospitalization. We see a much bigger increase in the green patients, and this is what leads to the reduction of 22% in the hospital admissions. And obviously, those are all taken from the yellow bucket of patients. So recently, we've actually also conducted studies in COVID-19, and one of the most dominant ones was a study called Savemore, which we ran with a key opinion leader in Greece and with Sobi, the Swedish the pharmaceutical company. And we did this utilizing Super slightly different than we use it in the traditional emergency department. So you see the same diagram on the right hand side, but basically the discriminating factor was the Super level above or below 6 nanograms per mil, i.e. slightly higher than we traditionally discriminate. So we randomized patients into 2 groups, one where standard of care was given, i.e. the patients were given the traditional dexamethasone or whatever they were given to treat the COVID-19 outbreak. And in the high Super levels, the ones or the other side of the arm was a dispensation of the anakinra, which is a drug from Sobi. So that dampens the immune system. But they were also given the standard of care. So you can argue that it's kind of a placebo trial, but you still leave in the standard of care. And we on the next slide, we actually reported a huge increase in the outcome. This means that the patients that were given the anakinra treatment, the active anakinra treatment, we reported a 64% improved outcome, and this is a combined outcome of respiration and mortality, i.e. if patients progress to die. This was published in Nature Medicine late summer last year, and we subsequently with Sobi helped them get a recommendation for this way of treating by ways of an EMA approval of an increase of their inlay in the medicine to show that they could treat COVID-19 disease by ways of utilizing Super to administer the treatment. This has led us to several value propositions, and this is the core of this slide. So we improve patient outcomes. It's actually favorable for the patients not to get admitted if they don't require hospitalization. We reduce the healthcare cost. We reduce the, as mentioned, the admission by 22%, and this leads to huge savings, as you can see on the left-hand side. In the COVID-19, it also leads to savings on the right-hand side, as you can see. But actually, what is probably most importantly in our sales is the empowering of clinical staff. So in the acute wards, the treating physicians are often more junior than in other departments because they need to work shifts and so on, and it's actually a very complicated task. So we help them make their decisions early on. So to sum up, we are not a diagnostic marker, we're prognostic by ways of saying we don't point to the exact disease, but we are the best marker for pointing to what is the risk on the longer term. We're not specific to diseases. We basically measure inflammation, which is an underlying condition of many and actually most diseases that you see. We're a very, very stable marker. This means that you don't need to take several measurements to see the kinetics of whether it rises or falls. You can actually act on the absolute level when the patients arrive at the emergency room, and we're fast. It takes about 20 minutes. So with that, I will leave it to Mark.
Thanks. I'll go through a bit about our products and our strategy in general before getting into the Q1 results. So in general, we have 3 products on the shelves. One of them being TurbiLatex, which is our main product. This was launched in 2018-19 and has since been validated on Siemens, Roche, and Abbott instruments, meaning that we can now target say 80–90% of the hospitals in Europe that are using these products in clinical routine. The benefit of the TurbiLatex product is that it fits into the workflows they already have at the hospitals. It's a test that can be measured just like any other test, and is measured automatically through the existing systems that they have in the hospital. Then we have our Quick Triage product, which is a point of care test. It works a bit like the COVID-19 antigen tests that you might know, but it has some extra workflows and it's a bit more tedious to use in clinical routine than the TurbiLatex flows. But still, some hospitals prefer this, and they can get it even further out in the emergency department when patients come in. And lastly, we have the ELISA product, which is our research product. It was the first product that was launched, but it's not beneficial to use ELISA in clinical routine since you have to measure many patients at once in order for an ELISA test to make sense. In general, we have roughly 90% of our revenue being recurring. So that means from customers that have ordered 2 times or more in the last 12 months. We have an average price of 15 euros per test. Depends a bit on whether we sell directly or through a distributor. And then lastly, we have a gross margin across the products between 75 to 90%. The addressable market that we have in Europe and North America is roughly €250 million in the emergency department in each region, and roughly 50 million euros within COVID-19. We have also additional opportunities in other specific diseases. For us, COVID-19 was a testament to the fact that we can also be specific. Super is unspecific in the nature, but we can be used in specific diseases to guide intervention. So there are additional addressable markets outside of our core focus on the emergency department and the COVID-19 department. We currently sell directly in Denmark, in Spain, in France, and in Benelux, and we sell indirectly through distributors in most other European markets. We also have research use only distributors in North America and in parts of Asia and the Middle East as well. Lastly, we have a fourth product that we expect to launch in the first half of this year. It's a product that's very different from our other products, because the other products, they need a full blood sample in order to measure super, but this product, the Supernostic Plus, it only needs a finger prick of blood. It's easy to set up and it can be used in a point of care setting. So you basically just need a computer with a connection to the device you see on the picture. And this both serves our existing segments, but it also opens up opportunities in other segments, such as using it at the general practitioner level before people even get to the hospital, or potentially also targeting the private health test market, could be measuring super in pharmacies and other areas. Lastly, we have an experienced team, I believe more than 100 years combined life science, diagnostics, growth company experience. We just added 2 new board members to our non-executive board, being Valérie, who's a French national with vast experience within life science and diagnostics, and Patrick Dahlén as well, who's also had more than 35 years in international life science, medtech, and diagnostics. Looking at the Q1 report, we published the best revenue results we've published in the company's history in a quarter. So we had 3.2 million Danish kroner in revenue, which is a 54% increase compared to same period last year. I'll get a bit back to what were the drivers of this. Our operating loss decreased as well by roughly the same amount. And we still operated at a loss, meaning that our cash balance declined to roughly 11 million DKK by the end of the quarter. We still maintain that we can become cash flow positive with existing cash at hand. One of the effects is, of course, our expectations for revenue and growing that side of the business, but we also have some cost decreases in other areas, as we've outlined also in the annual report and in the Q1 report specifically. When you look at the drivers of the revenue increase, there's 2 primary KPIs that are interesting to look at. One of them is clinical routine hospital customers. So how many hospitals actually use this to triage patients or to decide who should be treated within the COVID-19. And here we increased from what we call +15 in the 2021 annual report to 33 clinical customers by the end of Q1. So in a quarter, we've doubled our clinical routine customers, and that's both in Northwestern Europe, in Southern Europe, and in Eastern Europe. The other interesting metric to look at is our sales by product type. So the quick triage and TurbiLatex are the products that are useful in clinical routine. And as you'll see on the graph, in 2019, we didn't really have any sales in the clinical segment, but that's increased gradually over the years and now comprise above 70% of our total revenue, which is a metric we're following quite closely, and is an indication of the success we're having in both the emergency department and COVID-19 departments. So what should investors look out for in the remainder of 2022? First of all, COVID-19 has become a significant part of our business, and it is worth looking at how the pandemic develops and potential new announcements from national health authorities in the way that they recommend using super for treating COVID-19. That's one area to look at. It could be potential new variants or subvariants, as are now found in South Africa, but could also be new waves in our core markets. Then, of course, it should be new markets and customers. We don't disclose small to medium-sized customers anymore, as we don't believe that it's insider information or that it affects the value of the share given the size we have now. But we do announce very detailed in our quarterly or interim reports. We announce how many customers we have, and if we get specifically large customers, we will also announce that. So that's worth following as well. And then lastly, of course, the expected launch of our finger prick product in the first half of 2022 is something to look out for. Those were the words we have here, and we'd like to welcome any questions you might have.
Thank you very much for that introduction. So I will just repeat to everybody who's listening that you can ask questions. There's a control either on the right side of your screen or the bottom where it says questions. You can write your questions there, and I will read them out and take them to the company. But if I can just start briefly, I remember back in your annual report you said that you had not yet seen any commercial effect of the label extension for super guided anakinra treatment for COVID-19 patients. And I noticed now in the most recent reports, in the Q1 report, that you said that things are now starting to move. Is that your general impression?
Yes, that is the general impression. So the EMA approval did in the first quarter of 2022 increase the awareness and the interest in using Supernostic quite significantly. So we've experienced quite a big interest from many different hospitals, and we have also seen sort of that, say, spillover effect to the emergency department, which still is our core focus. We are seeing a spillover effects of customers starting by using the Super for emergency department use or for COVID-19 use that are then transitioning into the emergency department. So the EMA approval has definitely done something to the awareness and interest of Super.
And I noticed that you highlight also in the report that this is one of the main priorities going forward, to convert customers who are using it for COVID-19 triaging and get it to general emergency department use. Now, in that effort, are you talking to the same decision makers? Is it the same as the decision makers who made the COVID-19 triage decisions, who also decide whether it's going to be used more widely in emergency departments?
Yes, the typical decision makers or the initial ambassadors are typically the same, because they are typically from the infectious medicine and or acute care, depending a little bit on the organization within that particular country. So we need to get the ball rolling by ways of a clinical need in the hospital. Then we have actually several decision makers or stakeholders in the process. So the next one we need to convince is basically the clinical lab, and this is where we need the ambassador from within the areas of the hospital to work with us to say this is an important product, we need it as part of the menu within the lab, and that once that has occurred, we're actually measurable for also the general ED if the hospital allows this, and this is typically decided then by the senior management. So it is a process that we need to undertake, but it's really important to have that initial ambassador or agent working with us to introduce the product as a valuable product, whether that be in COVID-19 or the traditional emergency department. So it's a very good door opener, but we have also guided that we need to do more work in order for it to be applied in the general triage process.
Okay, thanks. And as for the number of routine customers, you made a specification or maybe a clarification last year what constitutes a routine customer. I think also you redefined what constitutes a routine customer. Now, are you happy about that definition? Is that what you're going to be using going forward? And also, Mark, I took your comments earlier to mean that you're going to publish the total number of routine customers on a general basis in the coming quarterly reports. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. So we will publish it in future reports, both the interim reports and the annual report. We believe it's the best KPI in terms of how we're doing in our commercial efforts. The definition that we have is that it's a customer that needs at least 2 orders, paid orders, that have been placed for the use of clinical routine. So we need a firm commitment from the hospital in terms of actually using it in an area that's relevant for us in clinical routine, and they need to be paying for the products, and they need to have ordered 2 times. And we believe this is a fairly good indication of whether a customer will proceed to eventually use it on a recurring basis.
Now I want to turn the focus to the POC Plus product that you are coming close to launching now. You are aiming that at a slightly different customer segment from the general triage, the hospital triage product. So how do you think about the marketing and sales of that product? Do you have the manpower to reach out to different customer groups, or do you just simply rely on the distributors to take care of that?
That's a good question. The general product will be launched to the current segments. This has to do with the validation and also the regulations from the EU. So actually, to penetrate further out, we need to do more work. So I guess what Mark presented is kind of the visionary path for the product in a few years probably, that we will get to the GPs. We've always worked, even with our existing triple latex and so on, to basically open the doors of the hospitals. If the hospitals are not acquainted with the products, we will soon run into a battle with the GPs, because they need to get the opportunity to admit patients based on suPAR. And if the hospital is not well acquainted with the product, we end up with a bad situation with the customers. So initially, this product is basically aimed at the existing customers. Having said that, we may actually bring it a little bit forward. There are situations, especially in Spain, for instance, where we have triage desks in the hospitals. There's direct access to the hospitals in Spain, as opposed to Denmark, for instance, where you need a referral. But they've actually expressed quite a need to use a biomarker in order to separate the patients earlier on. So there may be expansion from within the existing customer segment of the hospitals, but further out, we may be able to get the product out to additional customers.
I see. If I can ask you a little bit about the numbers that you published in a Q1 report, I must first congratulate you on a strong report. Both revenues and costs outperformed our forecasts, and you made quite a surprising and strong reduction in OPEX this quarter compared to the same quarter a year ago. So that's at the same time you have increased revenues by 54%. You have actually lowered OPEX by, I think, 6%. Is there any particular development behind this?
Yes, there are a few things. So one of them being there were some remaining employees at that point in time in Q1 last year that are not in the company anymore. Those were within sales and marketing, where we reprioritized some efforts towards distributors compared to direct sales representatives. So that's one of the effects you see there. And then additionally, in Q1 last year, we had the use of quite a few consultants in both regulatory areas, but also within market access that we haven't had this year. So those are the primary reasons for the decrease. So we expect those cost levels to continue. All right.
And also, if you compare the outcome here to our forecast, you report quite a bit lower sales and marketing costs But at the same time, there's a slight increase also in R&D costs compared to our forecast. You mentioned that there has been some reallocation. Is that the main explanation for this?
Yes, that's actually the sole explanation. So we haven't had any change in the composition of our cost structure. The only thing is we've allocated employees differently because given the new IVD regulation that's coming from the EU, we've spent more time on R&D than we have historically. There's time from existing employees that's allocated differently than compared to when it was a few years ago. So it's the difference quarter on quarter for those costs are solely related to employee cost distribution.
Okay, so it should not be taken to mean that you are scaling back on your marketing and sales efforts.
No.
All right, and finally, you have an increase in trade payables. It's up to I think 3.3 million from 0.3 million in the previous quarter.
Yeah.
Is there anything in particular behind this?
Yes, it's the last payment, relatively last payment to a critical subcontractor on the EU project. That's the primary reason. All
right. Okay, I see. Right. I don't have any more questions on my list, and I haven't received any from the audience. So I think that just about sums up what I wanted to discuss with you today. So once again, congratulations on a strong report that confirms your growth schedule, and all best of luck going forward.
Thanks, Al.
Thanks
for
all
good questions.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.